There are people in this world who cannot be shaken. You have met them, or at least felt their presence. They move through difficulty the way water moves around stone, effortlessly, without resistance, without the kind of visible suffering that consumes most people when life decides to be difficult. Someone insults them. They do not flinch. Plans collapse around them. They recalibrate without panic. People attempt to destabilize them and find nothing to grab onto. No handle, no crack, no exposed nerve that produces the reaction they were looking for. You have watched this and wondered what they know that you do not, what they have that you have not yet found. Whether it is something you are born with or something you can build, the answer is something you can build deliberately, systematically, and with a depth of psychological understanding that most people never reach, because most people are too busy being affected by everything around them to ever stop and ask why. Here is the foundational truth that everything in this video is built upon. Nothing in the external world has power over you by itself. Not a person, not a situation, not a failure, not an insult, not a loss. Nothing. Every single thing that has ever disturbed your peace, hijacked your emotions, or stolen your energy did so not because it had the power to, but because it found something inside you to attach to: a fear, an insecurity, an unresolved wound, a need for something you had not yet learned to provide for yourself. Carl Jung understood this with extraordinary clarity. He observed that the things that trigger us most powerfully are not revealing truths about the world. They are revealing truths about ourselves. The irritation you feel toward a certain person is not about that person. It is a mirror. The anxiety that rises when things go off plan is not about the situation. It is a signal from within. The rage that floods you when someone disrespects you is not about their words. It is about the part of you that is not yet fully at peace with your own worth. Machiavelli approached this same truth from a different angle, the angle of power and strategic dominance. He understood that the person who can be provoked can be controlled, that emotional reactivity is not just a personal inconvenience, it is a strategic vulnerability. Every time you react, you reveal. Every time you are affected, you hand someone a map to your interior. Every time you lose composure, you surrender authority over yourself and give it to the very situation or person that provoked you. The untouchable person, the one who moves through the world with that quality of quiet, unmovable power, is not someone who has been spared difficulty. No attachment point, no wound left unexamined, no fear left unacknowledged. That work is what this video is about, and it begins right now. Before you can become untouchable, you need to understand with complete clarity why you are currently affected by the things that affect you. Not in a general sense, in a precise, psychologically honest sense. Because the answer is not what most people assume it is. Most people believe they are affected by external events because those events are genuinely threatening, genuinely painful, or genuinely unfair. And sometimes they are. But the depth of the reaction, the intensity of the disturbance, the length of time it consumes you, the degree to which it destabilizes your entire inner world, that is never about the event itself. That depth belongs to something the event is touching that was already there long before the event arrived. Jung called this the shadow, the unconscious repository of everything we have refused to fully face about ourselves, the fears we have never examined, the wounds we have never properly acknowledged, the insecurities we have managed around rather than moving through, the parts of ourselves we have judged as unacceptable and therefore pushed below the surface of conscious awareness, where they continue to operate invisible but enormously powerful, pulling our reactions from beneath us like a current we cannot see but cannot escape. Here is how you know the shadow is running your reactions. When your response to a situation is significantly larger than the situation seems to warrant, when someone's casual criticism devastates you for hours, when a minor setback spirals into a full identity crisis, when a stranger's indifference triggers a shame so deep it feels ancient. These outsized reactions are not about the present moment. They are the shadow, the unprocessed past, flooding the present with old pain dressed in new clothing. Machiavelli's strategic insight aligns perfectly with Jung's psychological observation. The prince who loses composure when insulted is not being overcome by the insult. He is being overcome by his own unresolved need for validation. The leader who is destabilized by opposition is not being defeated by his opponents. He is being defeated by his own attachment to things remaining under his control. The vulnerability is never external. It is always internal. And the enemies, both literal and metaphorical, who are paying attention will find it and use it. This is why the first and most critical step toward becoming untouchable is not learning to avoid difficult people or difficult situations. It is learning to examine yourself with the honest, unflinching precision of someone who understands that every reaction they have is information not about the world, but about themselves. The next time something affects you, really stops and ask the question that most people are too uncomfortable to ask. What inside me is this attaching to? What fear is this triggering? What need is this exposing? What wound is this pressing on? This examination is not weakness. It is the most sophisticated form of self-mastery available to you. It is the beginning of true immunity. There is an illusion that governs most human lives so completely, so invisibly, that almost no one ever recognizes it as an illusion at all. It is the illusion of control, the deep, persistent, exhausting belief that if you can just manage the right variables, if you can make people behave correctly, if you can keep situations from going wrong, if you can control enough of the external world, then you will finally feel safe, finally feel at peace, finally feel free. This belief is the source of more human suffering than almost anything else you could name. And Machiavelli, for all his reputation as a cold strategist, understood this with a sophistication that most of his critics never give him credit for. He observed that the prince who builds his security entirely on external circumstances builds on sand. Alliances shift, fortune turns. People who were loyal become treacherous. Plans that were airtight develop cracks. The world is fundamentally, irreducibly unpredictable, and any strategy for power or peace that depends on controlling it completely is a strategy that will eventually collapse. The only thing that can be controlled, the only thing that is truly permanently within your domain is your perception. How you interpret what happens to you, the meaning you assign to events, the story you tell yourself about what a setback means, what an insult reveals, what a failure indicates about your worth and your future. This is where the neuroscience becomes extraordinary. Studies in cognitive psychology confirm what the Stoics and Jung and Machiavelli all understood through direct observation. The brain does not respond to events. It responds to its interpretation of events. The emotional response you experience is not triggered by what happened. It is triggered by what your mind decided what happened means. Two people lose the same job. One experiences it as catastrophic confirmation of their deepest fear about their own inadequacy. The other experiences it as the universe forcibly redirecting them towards something better aligned with their actual potential. The event is identical. The emotional reality is completely different. Not because one person is stronger or luckier, but because one person has done the work to clean their perceptual filter. Here is the paradox that Machiavelli identified and the Stoics confirmed. The moment you stop trying to control the external world and redirect that energy entirely toward mastering your own perception, you become more powerful in the external world, not less, because you are no longer predictable, no longer destabilized by the inevitable chaos that life delivers to everyone without discrimination. The person who needs nothing from the external world to feel secure cannot be threatened. The person who needs nothing from other people's opinions to feel worthy cannot be insulted. The person who has made peace with uncertainty cannot be paralyzed by it. Let go of the illusion of control. Pick up the reality of self-mastery. These are not the same thing, and the difference between them is the difference between a life spent in exhorting, futile resistance, and a life lived in the clean, powerful freedom of someone who has finally understood where genuine control actually lives. Alright, so you get triggered. We all do. But what if you could stop that reaction in its tracks? It's not about why you react, but how you stop. The ancient Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius, talked about a space, a tiny moment between what happens to you and how you respond. In that space, you get to choose who you want to be. Modern neuroscience backs this up. When you're triggered, your brain's alarm system, the amygdala, goes off before you can even think. It floods you with stress hormones, prepping you for a fight you might not even need to have. This isn't about willpower. You're being neurologically hijacked. Your job is to create a pause, just an internal, split-second pause. Don't become the anger or the frustration, just watch it rise. By observing that emotional wave, you're no longer swept away by it. You're the one watching, and what you can watch, you can choose. What you can choose, you can master. Thanks for watching. Follow for more. There is a dimension of becoming untouchable that is rarely discussed, and it is one that Machiavelli addressed with his characteristic directness. The strategic use of emotional indifference as a social force. Most people understand, at least intellectually, that not reacting to provocations is healthier for them personally. What they do not fully grasp is how profoundly it changes the social dynamics around them. Because the way other people treat you is not primarily a response to who you are. It is a response to what they can get from you, what emotions they can produce in you, what reactions they can elicit, what evidence they can extract through your responses that confirms their power to affect your inner world. When you are reactive, you are readable. And readable people are manageable people. The person who knows exactly what will upset you, what will flatter you, what will intimidate you, what will make you desperate for their approval. That person has a complete psychological map of your interior. And with that map, they can navigate you, direct you. Uzi, ooh. Not necessarily through conscious malice, often simply through the unconscious. Social mechanics that govern how human beings interact with and exploit each other as emotional predictability. But the person who does not react, who receives insult with calm, criticism with curiosity, flattery without inflation, and attempts at manipulation with quiet, unimpressed awareness, that person is They provide no feedback that can be used to calibrate further attempts at influence. They offer no emotional purchase. They are in the most precise psychological sense. Untouchable. Machiavelli observed that the prince who reveals nothing through his reactions commands a kind of fear that is qualitatively different. And far more durable than the fear produced by aggression or punishment. It is the fear of the unknown, the deep, instinctive unease that human beings feel in the presence of someone they cannot read, cannot predict, cannot manipulate through the normal channels. It is a presence that communicates without a single word. I am operating on a level you do not have access to. This is not performance. You cannot fake this quality convincingly, at least not for long, and not in close quarters. It must be genuine. It must emerge from actual internal work. The shadow work, the perception work, the neurological training of the pause that produces real immunity rather than its cosmetic imitation. But when it is genuine, when you have actually done the work, and the stillness you project is a reflection of real internal stillness, the effect on the social world around you is remarkable. People stop testing you because testing produces no result. People stop provoking you because provocation finds no target. People stop attempting to manipulate you because manipulation requires a predictable reaction and you no longer provide one. And in that vacuum, where the tools that work on most people simply do not work on you, something unexpected happens. You become fascinating, magnetic, formidable. Not because you performed those qualities, but because you built the internal reality that makes them inevitable. We have talked about the internal work, the perception shifts, the neurological training, the strategic implications of emotional immunity. Now we need to address the piece that most people skip, and the skipping of which guarantees that all the other work eventually collapses. You cannot become untouchable while you still need to be seen as untouchable. Read that again, because it contains the single most common failure in every attempt at this kind of psychological transformation. People begin the work. They develop the pause. They practice observation. They stop reacting to small provocations. And then someone in their life notices and either tests them more aggressively or fails to acknowledge the change, or does not give them the credit they feel they have earned for the difficult work they have been doing. And in that moment, the moment of not being seen, the old wound surfaces, the need for validation, the hunger for recognition, the deep, unresolved question beneath all the psychological work. Am I enough? And suddenly, all the stillness collapses, because the stillness was built on sand, on the performance of immunity rather than its reality, on the management of reactions for an audience rather than the genuine dissolution of the triggers that produce them. Jung was clear about this. True integration of the shadow, true psychological wholeness, is not something you perform for the world. It is something that happens when you finally face yourself honestly enough that there is nothing left for the world to expose. When the wound is healed rather than hidden, when the fear is examined rather than managed, when the need for external validation is replaced not by its suppression, but by a genuine, earned sense of your own worth that requires nothing from outside to sustain it. Machiavelli would frame this differently but arrive at the same place. He wrote that the prince who is genuinely indifferent to opinion, not the prince who performs indifference while privately craving approval, is the one who is truly free to act strategically. Because the prince who needs to be seen in a certain way is always acisomi, Laval being directed by that need, always making decisions with one eye on how they will be perceived, always slightly less than fully sovereign over his own choices. True untouchability is not a state you maintain through effort. It is a state you arrive at through work, deep, honest, unglamorous internal work and then simply inhabit, because there is nothing left to protect. Because the self you were defending was a constructed self, and you have finally seen through it. Because the things the world was using to affect you were only ever powerful because of what you believed about yourself, and you have changed what you believe. This is the deepest level of what we are discussing. Not a technique, not a strategy, a transformation, one that cannot be rushed, cannot be faked, and cannot be borrowed from anyone else. It must be built from the inside, one honest self-examination at a time. You've just been given the complete architecture. This isn't just tips. It's the actual structure of internal power. It starts with a simple truth. Nothing can affect you unless it finds something inside you to cling to. This is the deep reading of Machiavelli. Understanding that real power isn't about manipulation, but about internal sovereignty. The most formidable person isn't the loudest. It's the one who is genuinely unmoved because they've done the work everyone else avoids. Most people won't walk this path, not because they can't, but because it requires honest, uncomfortable work on yourself, examining the fears and wounds your reactions have been pointing to for years. But for those who do, the freedom is unimaginable. Imagine no person or situation having the power to steal your peace. This isn't about building armor. It's about becoming so complete that the world's chaos finds nowhere to land. This is where we go deeper. Subscribe and share this if it resonated with you. Comment below. What trigger will you examine first? The work begins now.